A tradition unlike any other. It's the Masters on CBS. No, not a CBS promo, but hey, alongside Jim Sonis, I am Greg Sussman, and while Jim Nance isn't here with us, I can feel his presence in the room.
We'll just try to be as adequate as a fill-in as I possibly can. You know, no one can quite compare to Jim Nance, but I'm at least halfway there with the Jim, so I guess we'll go with that. I'm pumped, Greg. You know, we're getting there. We're getting close to Augusta. I'm pretty excited. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's the one tournament that I know, not just me, but like everybody looks forward to all year and all season long. There's a lot of other fun tournaments that we play in and we talk about, but Jim, nothing compares to the Masters.
And I feel like this year it's even bigger because when you look at the top end of the field, there are so many guys who have been playing really good golf for like a year now. You got, of course, your Rory McIlroy, Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas, but also Tiger Woods actually has good current form coming into this. You know, Ricky Fowler's rattling off some wins. Like, Ricky Fowler's getting wins. This is a really weird event. Like, it's always a fun event, but I feel like this year with how many golfers, how many top-end guys are golfing so well, it's just so much more exciting than usual.
Absolutely. So let's start breaking it down from a DFS perspective. When we start at the top, where Dustin Johnson, is this the year he's wearing the green jacket?
Yeah, I really think it could be, Greg. When you look at this from a DFS perspective, you're kind of trying to choose between Dustin Johnson and Rory McIlroy. McIlroy is $12,100. DJ is $12,000. So if you want to get both, you got to get pretty creative on the lower end. And for me personally, I'm probably just going to pick one or the other. And I think when I try to do so, I will choose Dustin Johnson more often than I choose Rory McIlroy, because Johnson has just been, he's been money. On his second shots, on his approach shots. Over the past 50 rounds, he ranks 4th in this field in approach per Fantasy National. He is also 3rd in distance over that time. So Dustin Johnson, a stud in both areas. Now, Rory does lead the field in distance in that time, but he's 18th in approach. And when we've seen Rory rattle off all these really good finishes, a lot of it has been fueled by a good putter. Now, it's very possible McIlroy is just putting better than he has in the past. We also know that putting is pretty volatile. If I am excluding putting from the scenario and looking at the current form, I favor Dustin Johnson because his approach has been better, and that matters a ton at Augusta. If we look at Dustin Johnson, before the WGC match play, his finishes were outstanding. He was 6th at the Valspar, 5th at the Players, got a win at the WGC Mexico. So yes, Rory McIlroy is golfing really well, but so is Dustin Johnson. So I think that for me, when deciding between these two guys, I'm going to go DJ more often than I go Rory. I think if you're doing multi-entry tournaments, you should get both in there at some point. But if I'm choosing between the two, give me DJ by a hair over McIlroy.
It's really close between these two superstars. And you saw it during the WGC match play. Rory's putting has to get better in order for him to be successful this weekend at Augusta National. Dustin Johnson, best player in the world, looking for that green jacket here this weekend. It's a toss-up, but I lean with you, Jim. I'm going with Dustin Johnson as well. After Dustin Johnson and Rory McIlroy, there's another tier below that, and that's where we're kind of living in here as we look for our next stud. And you're suggesting Tommy Fleetwood. How come?
Yeah, it's a good tier. You know, it's not just Fleetwood. You got Tiger Woods, who is $11,100. Yeah, that guy, that one guy. But Paul Casey is there too. Love Paul Casey. We talked about him on this show before. But I kind of think that because there are so many big names in this salary tier, we could see Tommy Fleetwood fly a bit more under the radar than usual. And Fleetwood is usually a popular DFS play because dude has been smoking hot for a pretty long time now. He was 5th at the Players. He was 3rd at the Arnold Palmer. This is after he had a scorching hot run last summer as well. And the Players, the Arnold Palmer, both really good fields, which is exactly what we will see this weekend at the Masters as well. Fleetwood statistically measures up well. He is 5th in this field in distance the past 50 rounds per Fantasy National. He is 21st in approach and 12th around the green. So no blemishes to the game for Tommy Fleetwood. Last year, he was at Augusta. Fleetwood finished 17th in that one, so he has course knowledge here. Maybe not the most expansive course history, but he does have course knowledge and finished well here last year. So I think that with all the really good golfers in this tier, I wouldn't really expect a guy like Fleetwood to be super popular. And given the fact that, you know, the stats are good, the current form is good, he has course knowledge, I think Fleetwood has the ability to post a top 5 finish. And for $11,000, I'm into it. So Tommy Fleetwood, a guy I'm very comfortable targeting in what is a loaded tier.
There's different directions that you can go in here. Jim likes Tommy Fleetwood the best, but if you have a different preference, that's okay too, because this is where you want to be in the top, and then right here, then you move on from there. Tommy Fleetwood is Jim Sonis' guy. Up next, we move on to the middle tier, Jim, and we go to one of your favorites, and that's Patrick Kenley. We'll talk about Kenley with Davis Maddock in a little bit, but Kenley's in here each and every week. Why will the Masters be the place where you have to own him this week?
Well, it's interesting you're talking with him, talking with Davis about him next, because the betting odds are actually part of the reason I like Kenley, because the betting odds for Kenley are longer than I think they should be. And while that may, turn people off for DFS, what it will also do is help ensure that Kenley will not be overly popular in DFS as you match with the win odds, which kind of reflect public sentiment, and pair them with his salary. You got Tony Finau, who is a similar salary. Gary Woodland is in there as well. Jordan Spieth is 10-4, and he should be popular this weekend too. So I don't think Kenley is going to get a lot of attention, and I think that the betting odds help kind of ensure. So I'm on board with Davis here, where Kenley is better than his odds would lead you to think that they are. But Kenley is statistically awesome. He is 10th in this field in distance the past 50 rounds per Fantasy National. He is 7th in approach in that same time frame. And he did miss the cut at the Players. So, the most recent form for Kenley is not elite by any means, but before that, he was 6th at the WGC Mexico, and he was also 15th at the Genesis, 2 tougher fields there, 9th at the Desert Classic before that. So when you combine all this together, Kenley is a guy who I would expect to go overlooked, who has decent current form and outstanding stats. I kind of think that he is a tremendous tournament play. For cash games, I probably lean towards Finau because he did finish so well here last year. But if I'm trying to find a guy who may not be as popular as Tony Finau, I kind of think Kenley is that guy. And I think that he's a little bit better than his betting odds will lead you to believe for this weekend.
Finau will be the popular play in cash games in this tier. You heard it from Jim. But Patrick Kenley could surprise people and makes for a solid tournament option, as well as someone that's, taking the stab at a cash game and saying, why not? Patrick Kenley's been solid, if unspectacular. Hopefully this weekend, he can turn that into just an awesome, awesome outing. Staying in the mid-tier, we go to one of Jim Nance's favorites. It's Keegan Bradley. What do you think about Keegan Bradley this weekend?
Jim Nance may be one of the few who loves Keegan Bradley, because a couple weeks ago at the Valspar, I had a lot of Keegan in DFS, and he was well on his way to making the cut. And then he had a classic Keegan Bradley moment where he totally blew up and kind of ruined a lot of my rosters. But I think that what that will do is keep Keegan off people's radar for this weekend. I think when it's a guy who is as good at what Keegan Bradley does, that's pretty attractive. He is $9,300. And in that pricing range, in that salary range, you don't find a lot of guys who are really talented with their approach shot, but Keegan Bradley very much is. He ranks sixth in this field in stroke gained approach over the past 50 rounds. That is per Fantasy National. That helped him get some really good finishes before that implosion at the Valspar. He was 16th at the Players, 10th at the WGC Mexico against tougher competition. And when you add that up again with the fact that he's probably not going to be super popular, I think that Bradley makes for a really solid play. He has made 4 of 5 cuts at Augusta in his trips here. He finished 22nd back in 2015. And I think that the current form now for Bradley, despite the finish at the Valspar, is better than it was in past years. So I'm going back to Keegan here. Could blow up my face yet again, because that is certainly a risk you take with Keegan Bradley. But I think that given what he does on his approach shots, it is worth the risk at $9,300.
Keegan Bradley's a solid player if he can ever just put it all together. And you heard what Jim was just saying about how he gets off this lead and then it just becomes a disaster. It's a story of Keegan Bradley's career. If he could put it together, though, just for a few holes, he's a smart DFS play. And in this middle tier, he's well worth it. 2 more players you want to get to with Jim, and it's the long shots, the guys you're going to take a chance at, the guys who have awesome, awesome value. I feel like we're missing some people here, though, Jim. Some of our normal players aren't on this list. How come?
Yeah. I was pulling for him really hard at the Valero Texas Open, trying to get our Byung-Hun Ons, our Sung Jae Im's in the field, Jason Kokrak.
There it is.
But Corey Connors, he got that qualification. So Corey Connors is also fun. I love Corey Connors. Excited to see him win. But our boys didn't make it, Greg. I'm still a little crestfallen from that. But I think we can rebalance some other value plays and maybe get back on the train with those guys next week.
I'm legitimately disappointed there's no Byung-Hyun on here, or Jason Kokrak especially. Like, those two guys, they're our dudes, Jim. They don't really win us much money, but they're our dudes.
Our large sons.
They are, exactly. All right, then let's go to who you're choosing over them. And as a value play, you're considering starting J.B. Holmes instead. How come?
I love the distance this guy has. At Augusta, you do want golfers who can go long off the tee. We don't get that from Keegan Bradley. That's not his strength that he makes up for with his approach. But for J.B. Holmes at $8,700, the distance is there. He ranks 5th in this field in driving distance over the past 50 rounds per Fantasy National. And he's good at his distance, but it's not like he's a scrub with his approach. He's also 23rd in strokes gained approach over that time. So good in both the ball striking stats for J.B. Holmes, which helps give him a lot of upside. And he showed that upside at Augusta back in 2016 when he finished 4th that year. Not too long ago, J.B. Holmes was actually a winner on the PGA Tour. He won the Genesis Open. He does miss some cuts, so definitely some volatility to the game here for J.B. Holmes, but once you get below $9,000, you're not going to find safety with many golfers anyway. So I am willing to take some risks, especially if it comes with some upside. And I think with Holmes having those good ball striking stats, I think that upside is definitely the key word here. So $8,700, had success at Augusta in the past, a recent winner, pretty good stats. I think that Holmes, another guy who carries upside, better upside than you would think for a guy at his salary tier.
Upside could be great at this salary because of how hard and how long and how far that J.B. Holmes hits the golf ball. And hopefully at Augusta, things will go his way. One last value player to get to here, Jim, and that is CH3, Charles Howell III. Why is Charles Howell III in here and not Jason Kokrak?
Yeah, we talked about what helps that he's in the field, for Charles Howell III. That's certainly a plus. I like to use guys who are actually at the event. We talked about J.B. Holmes being an upside play. I think that if you're looking for some safety in this salary tier, Charles Howell III really is your guy at $8,600 because he's been to 9 events since January 1st. And in those 9 events, or 8 events if you don't count the WGC match play, in those 8 events, 2 top 10s for Charles Howell III. He has 6 top 25 finishes, and he has had no finishes worse than 35th. So a really solid floor from Charles Howell III in the year of 2019. He ranks 21st in this field in distance the past 50 rounds per Fantasy National. And he's really good around the greens and on the greens. Not as good in his approach as guys like Keegan or like J.B. Holmes, but good enough where he can still play up in his other areas. Howell has not been to Augusta in quite some time. He has not been here since 2012, but he has played here 8 times. So while there is no recent course history for Charles Howell, again, course knowledge is still there for this guy because he has played at Augusta plenty of rounds. I kind of think that when you look at these value plays, if you're looking for someone below $9,000, Howell is probably the guy who has the best odds of making the cut, and that is super valuable in this salary tier. He has the upside for a top 15 finish as well. So for cash games, give me Charles Howell III. For tournaments, I might go J.B. Holmes over Charles Howell III, but I think they're both really good plays there as well. So Howell, a guy who fits in all formats for what I'm looking for this weekend.
If he checks all the boxes for Jim, he should check all the boxes for you. He's a consistent player, hasn't played here in a long time. I mean, you talk about this, Jim, I want to throw it back to you. He hasn't played here since 2012. I know it doesn't sound long ago. That's 7 years. I mean, that's a really long time since he's been at the Masters. I know you said that he's got that course history in here, but a lot changes in 7 years.
Yeah, I was a sophomore in college the last time Charles Howell III played at Augusta, and that was quite a long time ago. My hairline will show you the effects of 7 years, Greg. So it's been a long time, but I think with how well Howell is playing and the fact that he has been here, he's not going to be daunted by Augusta like we'll see with a lot of debutants. So I think that's what's valuable to me, and hopefully Charles Howell III's game is holding it better than my hairline has since 2012.
It's all for the money, Jim. It's all for the money. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Davis Maddock to break down the Masters field from a betting perspective. Stick around. More FanDuel Hurry Up on the way right after this. Back with you on the FanDuel Hurry Up. Greg Sussman now joined by Davis Maddock of DailyRoto.com to break down the Masters from a betting perspective. Davis, you pumped for this week, man?
Could not be more pumped. Masters Week, probably one of the absolute best weeks of the year. Great 4 days of golf to watch. And sometimes it doesn't even matter who wins, but it's a lot better to have the winner on Sunday than to not.
You want that winner on Sunday, obviously, and I hope it comes down to it. So let's get to some of the best bets. We were breaking down before Dustin Johnson versus Rory McIlroy. From a DFS perspective, Jim's going with Dustin Johnson. From a betting perspective, if you're going to bet one of the favorites, which one are you going to choose?
So I have Rory McIlroy, despite him having worst odds at most of the books. I think that Rory has very superior course history here, which is something that the guys at Data Golf have shown that the Masters actually does have some predictive value. Rory, in general, when both he and DJ's games are at the very top of their form, I actually think Rory can kind of reach one more place that DJ can't quite get to. And I think that Rory finally does compete his career Grand Slam at the Masters this year.
We'll see if he can finally get it done. Rory, who wasn't putting so well just a couple of weeks ago, he's going to have to turn that around in order to be successful here this week. Up next for Davis Maddock, it's Patrick Kenley. We spoke about him earlier at 66-1. Jim likes him from DFS. How come you like him for gambling purposes?
Kenley is just one of those guys, no matter what statistical model you run, as long as it does not include putting, Kenley is going to look like one of the absolute best players on tour. He is inside the top 10 in total strokes gained. He's one of the best on tour in strokes gained off the tee and approaching the green. You put a putter in his hands and, things start to go sideways. But there are a few things that go for him at Augusta, namely the fact that the par fives are a huge edge for the guys who can get the ball out there a pretty decent ways, and the greens are so fast that kind of everyone just putts bad, so it levels the playing field a little bit for guys who are naturally bad putters like Kenley.
Perfect. We need the level playing field for a guy like Patrick Kenley. We'll take what we can get, and maybe you lay it down at 66-1. Up next, we move on to Xander Schauffele. What's going on with Xander? Why do you like him this week at 40-1?
So Xander is sort of just like a rich man's Kenley in the sense that they both get the ball off the tee pretty well. They're both young. They are, both have had success on the PGA Tour pretty young. The thing is that Xander is a little bit better at putting. I actually would not even call Xander a bad putter. And so the fact that he has a little bit more touch around the greens, has also a little bit longer of a track record in terms of sustained success, means that you do have to eat the price at 40-1 instead of getting Kenley at 66-1. But I would say that Xander at 40-1 and Kenley at 66 or even 80-1, those guys are my absolute favorite bets of the week, the two that I'm heaviest on myself.
Xander and Patrick Kenley, the two favorite bets for Davis Maddox. Similar players, but different odds. Kenley at 66-1, maybe a little bit better. But don't forget about Xander at 40-1. Up next, we get to Kel's little brother, Keith Mitchell, 200-1 at Augusta this week. How come you're throwing a few shekels here?
I mean, you got to take some bombs, right? There's always that good feeling when you're watching the Masters Saturday and you see a guy that you have a 200-1 bet on, and they're on that front page of the leaderboard. That's a very exciting feeling, and Keith can do that for you. He's able to score on the par fives, which is where a bunch of the scoring gets done at Augusta. He actually went to the University of Georgia, so he's pretty familiar with the conditions, with the sort of grass that they use. I would bet he's probably played a couple rounds at Augusta, even if he hasn't played the Masters, and he does have that strokes gained off the tee game that matters so much here at Augusta. So for 200-1, we're putting a bomb on Keith Mitchell.
Why not at 200-1? As Davis said, the best part about betting on the Masters is that random guy that's on the leaderboard in the first couple of rounds, and if you own him, you're like, whoa, just want that share. Hopefully for you, it's Keith Mitchell. Up next for us, we talked about him earlier, it's J.B. Holmes, a nice value play on FanDuel this week, and at 125-1, a nice bet as well.
125 to 1, pretty good price for a guy who has finished 25th and 4th here. He's actually won at some corollary courses that play similar to Augusta at the Genesis Open and at the Riviera as well. He just has that game. He gains strokes off the tee. He gains strokes with his long irons. And if you think about the way some of these holes lay out, you really do gain a whole shot of an advantage if you're able to hit it past some of those very tricky bends that they have on the course. And JB is a guy who, when his game is going well, he can really sort of overpower the course in a way that takes some of the trickery out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. JB Holmes, we've said it before, he's a consistent player, hasn't played at Augusta in a long, long time. But if he can just show up here this weekend, he could make his mark and surprise some people in his return to the Masters. One last bet we want to get to with Davis Maddock, and that's Justin Harding at 250 to 1. One last long shot. We gave you Keith Mitchell. Why are you going with Warren G's great-grandson?
So Justin Harding is just a pretty cool story. He battled from 500th in the world, and now he made it into the top 50 to get the Invitational to the Masters. There are a lot of guys who've played a lot of professional golf and have never put together a sustained run of form like Harding had here. He was in the WGC match play. To exclude him from, the top 50 form golfers in the world would be wrong. So when you see him at 250 to 1, it just doesn't make a ton of sense in terms of where he ranks in the hierarchy of the world golf rankings. So there's not anything particular about his game that I think suits this course. I just think it's sort of a mathematical error of a price.
250 to 1, a long shot of all long shots. This price is where we're going to take advantage and hopefully win some cash this weekend. Also, little note for you, Justin Harding, I've just been informed, not the great-grandson of Warren. That's going to do it for us here on the FanDuel Hurry Up. I want to thank my guests, Davis Maddock and Jim Sonis. Tomorrow, I'll be joined by Ricky Sanders to break down the MLB slate. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night. Good luck this weekend, and enjoy the Masters.